This thing um, was supposed to be a tenor guitar, right? And so this was originally going to be tuned in fifths so that you could play like fiddle music on it, right? And so I kind of based that on the Irish banjo, um, because the Irish, they like their fiddle music, and that Celtic music has been incredibly influential culturally. Like it's still influential culturally. The beats, rhythms, you know, that's kind of a big foundation of Western music to a certain degree that it was built on. You know, folk music and things like that. So it was kind of interesting, kind of tracing the histories of like, oh, where did the Irish banjo come from, and then why did they make tenor guitars and things like that. It's an interesting evolution. That's what I'm kind of into, and that's what I mean, like culture and things like that. It's there's there's some things that are in the past, and it might not necessarily be relevant to our modern world, but there's still all these little fragments from the past that are still with us, you know? Just little here and there, little things. And I think a lot of that is in music and instruments. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Rhino put an insane amount of energy, and he did it right away. He didn't meander. He didn't meander at all. He just did it. I meander around. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I always just think of traditions of people and culture over the centuries. That's my connection to the past, I think. Um, and that's one thing that I heard. Nice. Well, that's the thing is, you know what's interesting? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Speaking of paganism, of the one of the things I read about it, which was interesting, the significance of the oak trees, right? So you have this tree that's like hundreds and hundreds of years old, right? And every year at a certain time of year, you do some ritual around this tree, right? And then your ancestors had been doing that same thing around that tree at the same time of year. The tree still is living, but the people from the past is gone. But that connection that the trees kind of represented this living connection to the past. From my understanding, that's how I read somewhere how they explained that. And I thought that was really interesting when you kind of link. They always say it's like, oh, they worship the trees. And it was like, no, they weren't necessarily worshiping a tree like it was a deity, like it was a god. The tree was just kind of um, a living focal point to their ritualistic lives, where it was the constant, this tree as a symbol. And it kind of hit home with me, that concept, when I was in the desert. I was down by San Felipe in Mexico, and there was these ancient cactuses. They're old. They're some of the oldest living creatures or living plants in the world. They could be anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 years old, they say. And seeing this ancient cactus, it was gnarled like an oak tree. And it was really interesting to kind of be in the presence of something that was alive, when the Roman Empire was around, or, just something that was like alive 2,000 years ago, that this thing was here on Earth. when, you know, all these things were happening. So in a way, I kind of understood those kind of living connections, what the symbol of an ancient oak tree would be to someone, and why that would be kind of significant connection to your ancestors. That's how I kind of see it, if that makes sense. I could be wrong. I'm not an occultist. But anyway, they're speaking of yeah, acknowledge and respect. You know what's interesting is bog oak. Well, that's what it's observing things, I think, is admire and acknowledge. So like on the solstice, one observes the solstice. You're not worshiping the solstice